Just address your question to a particular member of the panel if it is a directed question, otherwise you can throw it to anybody. Over to you, Jason.
Mine would be to, I think, all three of you, given that you've got very different perspectives or come from different angles on it. One issue that I've found that I just can't solve in my own head is, and I think it came up in all three of your speeches, is this incongruence between culture. Whether it's, the lack of recognition of sacred sites, or education or cross-cultural communication is probably the best example. It's just a matter of we want to be equal, and as is said in that quote, we're still different though. I wanted to hear from each of you, if that's all right, how you think something like that can be solved, where you can either choose to coexist under one or two sets of laws, or I guess live in relative isolation but with a mutual respect that that's what is wanted, to live how Aboriginals did live before we came here, and let white people live how they live and dominate today. And also, if possible, if you could relate that to education, because I see that as a major issue, and how, whilst it's 13% completed year 12, a big issue that I've found through some reading is that often they don't want to complete year 12. Their parents were put in schools for the purpose of assimilation, and so the children aren't encouraged to go to school because their personal history with schooling and education is so negative and genuinely racist that there is that inherent fear from experience of subjecting themselves to it again.
Well, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. How do you start bridging a gap when the divide is so vast? But I agree with you, education is a fundamental, I think, beginning. So is understanding, getting to know each other's respective cultures is absolutely a fundamental. I don't know, perhaps I'll pass on the mic.
I think that the non-Indigenous cultures have to keep faith with Indigenous people. I think there's been a bit of a breach of faith in these last, certainly in the areas that I'm most familiar with in the Territory, with these kind of, let's get in there and solve everything. Those measures really don't work. Even taking Mal Brough at his best and perhaps accepting that he did think he was doing the best that he could, and I know people might disagree about that, but even if you accept that these things are done with the best of intentions, it's not enough. It's just not enough to say, I'm going to charge in and solve everything. You've got to keep listening. I think stages like the Royal Commission, the Mabo decision, these kinds of things, although they've got their shortcomings, and I'm sure most of you are well aware of the shortcomings, they are stages. It is a long road, and you've just got to keep working at it.
Yeah, I was intrigued by that elder's comments about wanting to change, laws that we, as Aboriginal people can change to, to suit the changing times, because a lot of Aboriginal culture will say that our laws have come from the Dreamtime and that's untouchable. And it's like the didgeridoo, where men say only men can play it. And I go, no, you want to talk to me about the Dreamtime? So Dreamtime is a circle. Let's go back all the way round the circle when the women had the instruments and the men stole it from us. Don't tell me that women can't play the didgeridoo. You're talking to a traditional law woman who's grown up with these, with this spirituality. And and I was really intrigued by that elderly woman's, her experiences and her vision, because it is about, in some ways, moving with the times, but in a way that is about empowering all of us here, And, the earlier comment about because this is the way my brain operates. But the earlier comment about how wonderful it is that they were seeking normal gay couples to be poster, families for gay marriage, and apart from those drag queens, those wretched drag queens, And I thought, well, the drag queens are entitled to get married to each other too, and they're not, what is this thing about trying to normalise things? But for me, the answer is to come back to spirituality and Aboriginal dream time. And, when you can walk the land and walk in the footsteps of the ancestors, then I think we can come up with appropriate solutions. And that when you can hear the spear grass growing and know what this country was called, what is the Maori name for New Zealand? Yes, Aotearoa. People know. What is the Aboriginal name for Australia? See, you draw a blank response. You don't even know that. From the Kimberley where we are, it's called Bundayan. So you're all Bundayans instead of Australians. Australis, the southern land, comes from Latin. That's where Australia comes from. But to not even know that, to not even know the names of the towns that you were born in. And when I take people on Dreamtime courses, I get them to listen to sounds and put their ears down to the ground. And I say, tell me the name of the place where you were born. And someone will say Newcastle. And I go, no, tell me the Indigenous name. Oh, I don't know. And I go, no, you do know. And so I get them, and finally I get, what does it sound like? What does Newcastle sound like? What does the environment sound like? And so it's about sharing in our culture. And Aboriginal people have always been generous about that. And the other thing is valuing Indigenous culture and valuing Indigenous law. Why don't you come and talk to us about the earthquakes in Japan? We'll tell you a few things. Why don't you come and talk to us about the bushfires here in this land? We'll tell you better fire strategies and how to manage country so that you don't have a repeat. Why don't you come and ask us about the floods in Queensland? I could have told you were going to get flooded out. In fact, I told everybody. Because we understand the land and the country and the energies that are here. And so it's about, I think the answers lie in sharing that. In some ways, yes, there are differences that exist, but come and share, because we hold this land together, all of us, and we walk in it. We are responsible for the laws that are made and our participation in it. Come and walk with us. And instead you get people who just preach hatred and fear, and that's all divisive. But it's wonderful to see all your green mob, because you've got a part to play too with us. And again, just where my brain goes, the thing about marriage and how there's different cultural interpretations. Us mob, we go, when we're little, we're taught, now don't go marrying wrong way. Don't go marrying your cousin or whatever. You see those birds and those blue mountain parrots, all the coloured ones? That's what happens if you marry wrong way.
I know, Paul, you mentioned that there's problems in the fact that we say, are you an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander of descent on pretty much every form we fill out. So I'm just interested, particularly in terms of education, whether you support things like scholarships for Indigenous students, when obviously that's a specific address, you're putting them in a different category, even if it's for a benefit. Do you support those measures, or would you consider them paternalistic as well?
I would definitely support those measures. It's a very difficult balance to strike between providing equality and assistance. I mean, especially within legal realms, Indigenous lawyers and barristers, I believe, somewhat scarce, but that they are coming through, and we need to support that and nurture that, but not only within the realms of law, but with other important positions within society. It's similar to, I guess, the Parliament of Australia. Go back 20 years ago, it was rare to see a woman there. So we do need that representation across society. But what I was, I guess, trying to get at is that, with things that aren't that important, to stereotype, and it creates a stigma, I think, in a person's mind. Well, okay, I am of this background, but so what? So I think, to answer the question, I do support measures where they're warranted, most definitely. And but as I said, I mean, where it's not really sort of needed, I think we've got to look at what's needed and what's not really. Yeah.